I'd like to call the March 31st, 2015 Longmont City Council meeting to order. This is a regular session. Could we please start with a roll call?
Yes, Mayor Coombs.
Here.
Council members Bagley.
Here.
Christensen. Here. Finley. Here. Levison. Moore.
Here.
Santos.
Here.
Mayor Coombs, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call, public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their name on that list will have an opportunity to speak during the public hearing items this evening or on final call, public invited to be heard on any item at the end of the evening. So now we have the March 17th minutes. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move we approve the minutes.
Okay, so let's vote. Okay, that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Nope, there she is.
Okay.
Consent? It's the consent. You want me to pull?
Okay. Valerie, are there any agenda revisions?
No, Mayor Coombs, there are no agenda revisions.
Okay. Is there a report from the city manager?
Yes, Mayor. Karen Roney's going to give a quick report based on Councilmember Finley's request to have information on mental health and give you some updates on where we're going to be and when we're going to bring that forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Karen Roney with Community Services. So 2 quick updates that I just would like to make this evening. One is that we will be holding the community conversation on mental health here in the Longmont community. It is scheduled for Monday, April 13th. It will be from 6:30 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. and will be held at Lightbridge Christian Church. And basically during that hour-and-a-half session, there will be some presentations. Basically, it'll be our conversation to begin community healing, as well as to talk about and learn a general overview of mental health issues, resources, awareness of those resources, and beginning to talk about action that can be taken. Also, there will be some booths that will be set up for, and we have about 8 to 10 agencies that will be there for people who would like to, at the close of the meeting, visit individual agencies and get some additional information. We also will utilize that time as an opportunity for folks to sign up who are interested in going that next step in the community conversations about as a community, what might be able to do to better address mental health needs in our community. So what we anticipate bringing back to council for a presentation would be on April 21st to outline a little more detail as far as what we see some of those next steps being. We, Mike Butler and I and some other folks in the community are putting together that framework. Obviously, we'll have more information that comes out of that April 13th meeting that we would add to that framework, and then we plan to come back to City Council on April 21st with a little more detail about how we envision moving forward. So just wanted to take this opportunity to let you know what we were planning and to see if there are other questions. I know that Rigo and Rigo Leal and Robin Erickson are putting together the information to inform the community about the April 13th meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we have several presentations to do tonight. The first one is a proclamation designating March 28th through April 4th, 2015 as Community Food Share Drive Week in Longmont, and Board Member Gordon Pedro will be here to accept that proclamation.
Well, Mayor, as representative of the Board of Directors, we appreciate the fact that you're going to give us this proclamation tonight. As you know, the issue of hunger in Boulder and Broomfield County is not lessening. It's certainly accelerated after the Great Recession, and it has continued to be a problem. And so we really appreciate all the effort on the part of the public to see that the food is donated and that we're able to see it gets distributed to the folks that need it. So thank you for this opportunity to receive this proclamation.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation now. The proclamation designating March 28th through April 4th, 2015 as Community Food Share Food Drive Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas hunger denies dignity, lessens human energy, erodes community and family stability, and impairs the potential of people and societies to achieve. And whereas Community Food Share exists to be a leader in our community's effort to end hunger in Boulder and Broomfield counties, and whereas Community Food Share distributes over 8.3 million pounds of nutritious food in both counties in 2014, and 3,716,922 pounds of nutritious food, 45% of the total food distributed by Community Food Share in 2014 were distributed in Longmont area through the 14 partner agencies. And whereas Longmont citizens are very generous and compassionate people with a long and strong history of support of Community Food Share in its 34 years of service to our community, and whereas the Times Call is the sponsor for the 27th annual Hunger Hurts the Whole Community food drive in Longmont for Community Food Share from March 28th through April 4th, 2015. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coombs, Mayor, by the virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of March 28th, through April 4th, 2015 as Community Food Shared Food Drive Week in Longmont. And I invite all residents of the community to be aware of the special and vital services provided to the hungry in Longmont by Community Food Share, and to donate food and dollars with generous spirit to those in need. The next proclamation designates April 2015 as Fair Housing Month in Longmont. Carmen Ramirez, Communities Relations Program Coordinator, will accept this proclamation. So should I read the proclamation first? Okay. A proclamation designating April 2015 as Fair Housing Month in Longmont, Colorado, whereas April 2015 marks the 47th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, which affirms the right of every citizen to obtain housing of their choice regardless of race, color, sex, religion, national origin, disability, or family status. And whereas the state of Colorado law also affirms the right of every citizen to obtain housing of their choice regardless of race, color, creed, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, disabilities, marital status, or family status. And whereas these laws prohibit discrimination and harassment in all aspects of housing, including sales and rentals, evictions, terms and conditions, mortgage loans and insurance, land use and zoning, and are a vital part of ensuring Longmont is a welcoming and inclusive community where everyone can belong. And whereas we recognize the importance of fair housing education and the City of Longmont's effort to further fair housing for all. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coombs, Mayor, by the virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim April 2015 as Fair Housing Month in Longmont, and I invite all citizens of the community to be aware of this vital program.
There we go. Mayor and Council, thank you for issuing the proclamation for Fair Housing April month. We want to invite you to a couple of trainings that we're going to be doing, and you've got some flyers there with you. On April 8th at the Senior Center at 6:30, the Denver Metro Fair Housing will present a fair housing training. That's going to be targeting landlords, but it is open to all the community. On May 28th at 7 p.m. at the Longmont Senior Center, we have a special Homeowners Association training covering Fair Housing and Americans with Disability Act. So if you'd like to join us, please do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next proclamation designates April 2015 as Lassie Project Child Safety Month in Longmont. Laura Ownby, Director of the Law Enforcement Programs, Jenny Starkey, Director of Development for the Lassie Project, and Sarah Ridgway, mother of Jessica Ridgway, are here to accept the proclamation. So I'll go ahead and read the proclamation first. A proclamation designating April 8th, 2015 as, excuse me, that's the wrong one. Proclamation designating April 2015 as, I'll get it. Where'd it go?
Gordon leave? Gordon's still here.
Gordon.
Give it to Gordon.
Did I hand you the wrong one?
No, he's got the right one.
Okay.
Hold on.
Well, I've got two fair housing ones, and I got the I Have a Dream, but I don't have the Jessica. Uh-oh. I'll just read it.
We're going to go high tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get it here, 6. Let's see. Get it here. Okay, proclamation designating the month of April 2015 as Lassie Project Child Safety Month in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas there are an estimated 115 children that were victims of kidnapping in 2013, and whereas an estimated 100 children are abducted and murdered each year in the United States, and whereas nearly 90% of missing children have simply misunderstood directions of miscommunicating their plans, are lost or have run away, and whereas the first 3 hours are the most critical when trying to locate a missing child, and whereas the Lassie Project, a valuable free service for parents, caregivers, and guardians, provide the ability to notify an entire local community about their missing child in seconds, and whereas Lassie Project is endorsed by cities, law enforcement, and community organizations in over 2,000 zip codes across the United States. Whereas Lassie Project is endorsed by cities, law enforcement, and community organizations in over 2,000 zip codes across the United States. Whereas the Lassie Project is relentlessly focused on providing caregivers with the tools to regain control in a child abduction by alerting community members to help find children faster and galvanize the community to search together. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coombs, by the virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2015 as Lassie Project Child Safety Month in Longmont, and invite you to download the Lassie app to help protect your children.
Mayor Coombs and council members, thank you very much for proclaiming April Lassie Project Child Safety Month. We invite you to join us on April 25th as in hopes with the rest of the community for a health and safety kids fair. I hope that's all on your calendars. And on behalf of Sarah, myself, and the rest of our team, we are so proud to have Longmont as a partner in our fight against child abductions. Thank you.
And last but not least is a proclamation designating April 8th, 2015 as I Have a Dream Foundation 25th Anniversary Day in Longmont, Colorado. Our proclamation designates April 2015 as the I Have a Dream Foundation's 25th Anniversary Day. Lori Canova, President and Chief Executive Officer of I Have a Dream. So you're not obviously Lori, but all right. Would you like to make a statement first before I read the proclamation?
Well, my name is Kathy Williamson. I'm Vice President of Programs for I Have a Dream and here to represent tonight.
Okay. And I understand we're having a breakfast in Longmont
That's
tomorrow.
right. We're very excited to thank you so much for helping us kick off our 25th anniversary year. We've been in Boulder County serving children and families who are living in poverty for 25 years, and tomorrow morning we'll be hopefully able to sponsor more children and continue our work.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. A proclamation designating April 8th, 2015 as I Have a Dream Foundation's 25th Anniversary Day in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas I Have a Dream Foundation of Boulder County was founded in 1990 to educate, empower, and motivate low-income children to reach their education and career goals and provide them with a brighter future. And whereas more than 15,000 low-income at-risk youths in Boulder County are in need of comprehensive education and enrichment programs such as I Have a Dream, and whereas the I Have a Dream Foundation has reduced the high school dropout rate and has created a clear pathway to and through higher education for low-income students of Boulder County, and whereas I Have a Dream Foundation pledges to continue to assist low-income youth in the future, and whereas to educate 25-year-olds of providing services to over 750 impoverished children and their families, helping dreamers get to and through college, becoming productive members of society. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coombs, Mayor by the virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim April 8th, 2015 as I Have a Dream Foundation's 25th Anniversary Day in Longmont, and invite all to be aware of this vital program. For everybody that's not aware, when you donate to organizations like this, you go to pay your state taxes, you get 50% of your money back.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge. Okay, I guess it's time for public invited to be heard. The first person on the list is Danny Wade.
Mayor and Council, I'm concerned that we cannot
Could you
support...
please state your address for the record, please?
Oh, sure, absolutely. 1609 Moonlight Drive, Longmont, Colorado.
Thank you.
I'm concerned that we can't support 2 hospitals or 5 serving Boulder County. The Colorado Hospital Association shows data to support fewer patients are being admitted into hospitals, and they are not staying as long as they used to. The movement in healthcare is to control costs and to keep the sickest patients in the hospital, which means inpatient utilization is declining and will continue to decline. None of the existing 4 hospitals are even close to being fully utilized. And adding another hospital to the mix will dilute numbers even more. Also, I don't believe that there will be 200 jobs created, not long-term at least. Already our county is experiencing growing challenges with filling these positions for healthcare jobs. It's a relatively new phenomenon here in Colorado, but it is expected to continue. Much of the U.S. has been dealing with this issue for years. So will new jobs be added, or will we just see a dilution in the current labor pool? I'm concerned that healthcare costs will rise locally. As discussed earlier, fewer patients are being admitted to hospitals. but the costs involved in maintaining essential equipment and training of staff remain the same. UCH is not offering any services that aren't already being provided in this community. Fewer patients split between existing facilities who offer similar services with similar equipment to maintain. Costs will go up to cover these expenses. Who will be covering these costs? You and me. In addition, BizWest released an article in February that mapped out the cost comparisons Blue Cross Blue Shield for knee replacements and hip replacements from all around the country. Fort Collins and Loveland, where UCH is dominant, ranked second highest in the nation for costs for these surgeries. They charged $24,500 more than most of the rest of the U.S. and $22,000 more than those here in Boulder County. Is this a good use of our dollars? Especially because UCH receives significant state and taxpayer funding. UCH will only bring duplication of services, dilution of the labor pool, and higher costs to Boulder County. We should look towards continuing to build and maintain a thriving and robust healthcare system in Longmont and Boulder County. Allowing UCH to build this hospital is not congruent with that vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Norris?
Hi, Mayor, City Council peoples. I'm Bob Norris. I reside at 532 Ryder Ridge Drive here in Longmont. And I came here tonight to speak to you about an organization that I believe very strongly in and have devoted a lot of my time the last several months, and that's the Hispanic Education Foundation. And thank you, Mayor, for your support. And thank you, Gabe, for all you've done over the years for that great organization. The Hispanic Education Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization that has, since its inception in 1989, provided scholarships to graduates of high schools in the St. Vrain School District. A total of 472 scholarships totaling $365,000 have been awarded since 1989. The number of scholarships may be small, 30 to 45, when compared to the approximate 1,500 students who graduate annually from our school district. But our program largely benefits a particular important part of the graduating class, those who are the underserved and their families. We select students based on need, all the while concentrating on seniors who have overcome obstacles in achieving academic performance, as well as having engaged in volunteer extracurricular activities, together with recommendations from teachers and counselors. A unique aspect is that we present our scholarship to students at our annual banquet in the presence of their parents and siblings. You want to see some proud parents when their son or daughter walks across that stage to get their scholarship. Families today are struggling to pay for higher education. Additionally, a large decrease in state and federal funding of higher education over the past 10 years has pushed a large burden of the cost of education onto students and their families. Tuitions and fees at the common colleges that our students go to range from about $4,000 at Front Range to more than $13,000. And room and board is typically about $10,000. It's a lot of money when you're a low-income family. The financial challenges of daily life for low-income families are enough anyway without the burden of scholarship costs. Yeah, and the light's coming on. So let me finish up by saying we have typically raised money at our golf tournament, but we've determined that we need to do more. So we've have gone to some of the founding organizations, received money from the Community Foundation of Boulder County. So we're asking people to sponsor an individual scholarship, tax-deductible donations of any amount, sponsor the award banquet, purchase a seat or an entire table at our banquet, which is on May 7th, sponsor a hole at the annual golf tournament, and play in the annual golf tournament. And let me just finish by saying we are a complete board-run organization. We have no staff and very little overhead. So thank you very much. I'll leave some more information for you.
Thank you. John Peck?
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and Council. My name is Joan Peck, 1935 Spruce Avenue. The Times Call editorial in today's paper addressed Mayor Pro Tem Bagley's 3 options for gaining control over Longmont's eastern boundaries. 2 of the ideas make sense and have merit in conserving our natural water resource for the projected city growth from the present 80,000 to approximately 126,000. Our growth should be within the city limits, not outside. The third point, annexing Colorado 66 to I-25, could be troublesome. Much of this land has oil wells on it. Longmont cannot support the drilling operations while our ban is in place. Longmont would have to supply city services to any development on that annexed corridor, and it's at present outside our service area. An option that you might discuss and consider is an ordinance to not sell or lease water to any municipality or entity within approximately 25 miles of the city limits. This action would control urban sprawl and encourage development within the city. Please do not make a hasty decision over these annexation ideas and consider involving public participation in this important decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel White?
I press this button. Oh, good evening. My name is Dan White. I currently reside at 2808 South Lake Ridge Trail. I came out today to speak and protest against the UCH hospital expansion in the local community. I've been a practicing cardiologist in town here for 13 years now. I've worked at Longmont United Hospital, Boulder Community Hospital, Avista Hospital, and Exempla. And I've seen a lot of changes over the last 13 years since I've been here. More recently, we're seeing this competition between Centura hospitals and the university system, and now we're seeing that on our doorstep here. There really is nothing about this expansion that brings quality of care to the local community. It's simply about their competition. It's not like the community reached out and asked for these services. There's nothing that Longmont United Hospital currently isn't providing the local community that they will bring into the local community. The current existing healthcare within the city limits here is not overtaxed. You know, the hospital's operating currently with ICUs at about 70% capacity. They have 2 cath labs there now that are currently doing about 3 cases per day with a capacity of about 10 cases per day. So what we'll really see here is this duplication of services, this redundancy of care, and a dilution of our talent pool within the local community. I think we're also going to see healthcare costs increase, and my biggest fear is that one of these 2 organizations is not going to be fiscally viable, and my biggest fear is that that organization is going to be Longmont United Hospital, you know, the facility that has been here for 100 years providing care to the community. So I think that in many ways that this is just not the right decision for the local community here. I realize that this is not a certificate of need state, and that I don't know what the powers that the city council has or that the mayor has in order to protest this, but I think it would be something that would deserve looking into very carefully, simply because I think that this really does not bring an advantage to the local community. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Gordon Pedro?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive. I would like to address the editorial in today's Times Call. In big, bold type, it said, City Council should consider annexation ideas. These ideas were first introduced by Mayor Pro Tem Brian Bagley at the February 24th meeting. 2 of these ideas have merit, since they support the vision, policies, and strategies of the Longmont Comprehensive Plan. The third idea flies in the face of all sound planning principles in the comprehensive plan. First, acquiring the key parcels of land whenever possible to improve the open space buffer east of Union Reservoir and along our east boundary with Firestone is logical and continues the long-established efforts of the city to use open space as a tool to shape our city's boundaries and to keep Longmont a freestanding community. I encourage you to direct staff to aggressively pursue acquisition of key parcels of land. Second, it is a terrific idea to adopt an ordinance clearly stating that Longmont water resources will not be used to support urban development within reasonable distance of our community if such development is not fully compatible with the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. Key principles in the LACP include enhance the quality of life for those who live in, work in, and visit our community, develop a balanced, sustainable community, ensure cost-effective extension of infrastructure and community services, and formalize cooperation with other jurisdictions through intergovernmental agreements. I believe you will receive enthusiastic support for such a water policy because it will enhance the quality of life for all of us in this region. Finally, the wayward idea of annexing a few scattered parcels east of County Road 5, south of Highway 66, fails to meet any of the above-mentioned principles in the comp plan. In fact, such a notion violates all good planning principles and promotes unsustainable sprawl. More than 30 years ago, the Longmont City Council determined that providing infrastructure and services as far east as I-25 was neither feasible nor sustainable. As recently as 2006, a different city council reviewed and rejected the idea of annexing for urban development the newly added properties. These properties were just east of Royal County Road 5. However, the City Council did not believe it logical to jump over its urban shaping open space buffer with urban development. Please don't rush down this path of sprawling annexation without careful analysis and citizen participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Dyke.
Mayor and councilmen and women. My name is Karen Dyke. I live at 1412 Whitehall Drive, Unit B. I came tonight with a bunch of questions. It seems that there is a rush to get the Kerr-McGee settlement through without citizen information, but I have questions. This grant is for 3 pipelines. Was the original grant for 3 pipeline? If not, why would we allow 3 now? What water and other hydrocarbons are being referred to? Is this setting up to sell city water for fracking? Is this produced water? This seems to extend additional uses for the current pipeline. Why is 24 hours being allowed to begin cleanup of a spill? We all know that some spills are huge. Why would we allow this delayed response while pollutants are sinking into groundwater and evaporation causing air pollution? In Section 414, a number of federal regulations are listed as being followed. Are they truly agreeing to follow all of the federal laws for which they currently have exemptions? What is meant when the contract says Longmont can use the pipeline for transporting oil and gas? Are we now in the oil and gas business, or is the intent to transfer this to top operating? In the City Council communication sheet, there's a very troubling statement, and I quote, "The above settlement terms are consistent with principles of responsible oil and gas development within city limits. This settlement would result in dismissal with prejudice of the lawsuit, allowing the city to focus its attention and resources on defense of the charter fracking prohibition that is currently in the Court of Appeals. There is fair compensation for a pre-existing use on the property, creating additional funding that can be reinvested through the Open Space Fund." That's the end of that quote. Why are we settling? Is it so that there is responsible oil and gas development? This seems to be against our city charter. My final questions. Are the citizens being sold out so that if we lose the lawsuit, those who intend to gain financially are set up and ready to go? This council promised a full fight on the lawsuit filed by COGA, COGCC, and the top operating. To say that we need funds from this settlement to support that fight seems just disingenuous at best and at worst deceptive. I urge you to restudy this and not sign this settlement. Thank you.
Kay Fissinger.
Case number 2199 Creekside Drive. The proposed settlement of the Kerr-McGee versus Longmont lawsuit is in violation of the Longmont City Charter Amendment 16. Specifically, and I quote from the charter amendment that prohibits fracking within the city limits, quote, "In addition, within the city of Longmont, it is prohibited to store in open pits or dispose of solid or liquid waste created in connection with the hydraulic fracturing process, including but not limited to flowback or produced wastewater and brine. The Heartland open space within Longmont city limits. As such, the City Council is not authorized to enter into this settlement. To do so is a violation of the charter that each of you has sworn to uphold." The settlement authorizes 3 pipelines, one each for oil, gas, and water. I have consulted with 2 experts in oil and gas about these pipelines and have been told that the water line is a 20-inch HDPE water pipeline, high-density polyethylene standard plastic pipe used in the industry. Since it's in the same trench as a 20-inch gas line pipe and a 12-inch oil pipeline, all 3 are coming from the oil and gas production wells, sending these 3 substances from the production wells to a central processing facility. The 20-inch water pipeline will carry produced water, which is a toxic combination of brine water from the producing formation and frac flow back water. It is my belief that relying on Kerr-McGee to tell you the truth about the water is beyond foolish and contrary to the will of Longmont citizens. The oil and gas industry has a long history of concealment. Some would say lying. Any settlement that may occur should specifically cite Article 16 of the Charter and highlight that portion that prohibits disposal of waste products from fracking within the city. There should also be a method to prove that the water pipeline does not contain the prohibited waste, since the pipelines lie underground. Perhaps this would take the form of a sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury by a principal of Kerr-McGee. Furthermore, there is no bonding required of Kerr-McGee. In the event of spills, the city should protect itself before the fact from any failure to adhere to spill damage and restoration of the site. And it should do so in a way that does not necessitate the courts as the only avenue should Kerr-McGee violate the agreement or the infrastructure permit. I trust that after the city's experience with Walmart, where critical matters have been ill-defined or based on a handshake, this will not happen again. As currently written, the settlement must be rejected by this council. Jeff came late, I think, and after but I'm requesting the City Council to allow Jeff Thompson to speak to this issue. Thank you.
Sherry Malloy.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and members of City Council. Sherry Moy, 2113 Rangeview Lane. I'm back to speak about concerns about the Greenway Development Blueprint. As you know, I and several others spoke about this last week, raising several safety, environmental, and social concerns. Many of these were not discussed, so I'm back to bring these up again. Number 1, there were safety concerns with developing in an area we all know will likely flood again in our lifetime, despite the best planned and executed efforts. Again, Southmore Park, state-of-the-art flood mitigation was completed in August of 2013, with the flood occurring 1 month later. Although hundreds of lives and homes were spared, dozens were not. As Ruby's photos demonstrated, Missouri became a river with bridges, the bike trail, Kanemoto Park, pool, homes and lives significantly impacted, indeed still impacted. Keeping the 150-foot setback throughout the Greenway makes sense for safety, which staff and council repeatedly stressed was the #1 priority. The 150-foot setback not only better protects people and development, it protects river health, habitat, and wildlife. Number 2, another environmental concern not addressed was the resulting toxic stormwater runoff from the impervious structures development brings. Number 3, there were also social concerns raised, including the 2 to 4 story heights of the buildings, and also regarding the lack of targeted outreach to the residents of neighborhoods in close proximities to proposed developments. Number 4, finally, no mention was made regarding concerns with the huge $100 million public investment for flood mitigation. This public investment significantly increases private property values by taking these properties out of the floodplain and thus able to be developed. Because of the massive public monies which will be spent, the public should have some say and expectations about how these properties might be developed. Ideas like minimizing building heights and size, using green building standards, and other measures to minimize social and environmental impacts are reasonable expectations with a win-win. What was discussed was council's apparent approval of staff's recommendation to apply the 150-foot setback generally as a principle, with exceptions given to specific development. We all saw what happened with the flood when the exception was made at Harvest Junction. Please reconsider this surgical approach and honor the 150-foot setback for the whole corridor and protect people, structures, creek health, river, and wildlife. The Greenway is an absolute jewel and deserves due diligence for protection, not exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess now it's time for ordinances. Section 8, do you want to introduce the first item?
Mayor Coombs, your first item is ordinance 2015-18, a bill for an ordinance amending Title II of the Longmont Municipal Code by adding Chapter 2.99 on administrative civil penalties. And staff does not have a formal presentation on this item, but is present to address questions.
Okay. If anybody has a question before I open this up for a public hearing. Okay, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 2015-18. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item now? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on ordinance 2015-18. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move ordinance 2015-18.
Second. Okay, it's been moved to second. Let's vote.
I do. One of those two guys over there.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yeah, Councilmember.
One of those two guys over there.
See that collaborative effort there?
Yeah. Okay. That passes 7-0.
The next item is ordinance 2015-19, a bill for an ordinance approving the concept plan amendment and the land use amendment to the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan for the Copper Peak Apartments, generally located north of Park Ridge Avenue and east of Main Street. And Aaron Fostick is here to make a presentation on this.
I was having trouble seeing. Good evening, Mayor Coombs, members of City Council. I'm Erin Fostick, Senior Planner with Planning and Development Services Department. Tonight we are here for second reading and public hearing for the Copper Peak Apartments Land Use Amendment and Concept Plan. This property is located in the Longmont Tech Center neighborhood, as you can see from this vicinity map. This property is located north of Highway 66, actually north of Park Ridge Avenue, and east of Highway 287, north of the North Walmart Supercenter. As you can see from the materials in your packet, the applicant is pursuing a land use amendment and concept plan amendment to facilitate the development of up to 240 apartments with associated parking, landscaping, outdoor amenity space, and clubhouse. I'll give a short presentation on the land use amendment and concept plan amendment, and then the applicant is also here to provide a short presentation. The proposal for the land use amendment is to change from the current regional commercial land use to a high-density residential land use as depicted on this map. Again, this is for approximately 12 acres. So in the comprehensive plan, regional commercial land uses are intended to accommodate retail uses with national retailers drawing from all of Longmont and areas surrounding the city. They're typically at least 40 acres with a trade area of 5 miles, serving a population of 50,000 or more. Regional commercial areas are envisioned to have a minimum of 350,000 square feet of total gross floor area with at least 2 major anchors. The high-density residential category accommodates multifamily residential as well as group living facilities at a density range of between 12 and 30 dwelling units per acre. This would allow between 145 and 363 units on a 12-acre parcel. As I mentioned, the applicant intends to construct about 240 units. As you can see, the area is surrounded by regional commercial land uses to both the west and the south. Boulder County owns open space both north and east of this property. Highway 287 and Highway 66 are both designated as arterials in the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. Park Ridge to the south is designated a collector. Locational criteria are included in the comp plan, as you know, as a guide to determine appropriate locations for various land use. The locational criteria for high-density residential, this is outlined in your packet, are areas adjacent to or within walking distance of schools, parks, and or neighborhood or multi-neighborhood shopping, areas in proximity to employment, areas adjacent to arterial streets or accessible to such without passing through less intensive land uses, areas where high-density residential is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and areas served by public transportation. I have included an analysis of how this proposal complies with the locational criteria, but would be happy to provide additional detail if council desires. Moving on to the concept plan amendment, you can see the proposed concept plan here. This shows the entire parcel north of Walmart, which is currently undeveloped. The piece that we're talking about is that approximately 12-acre piece on the eastern part of the site. So the applicant is requesting that this 12 acres be shown as multifamily residential, and also that additional 4 acres be shown as RTD or retail. The annexation agreement for Walmart did specify that RTD could have first right for a park and ride at this site, so that is shown on this concept plan. The rest of the property, as you can see, is still shown as retail, which was contemplated on the original concept plan. Just to note, the property is zoned commercial planned unit development, so a rezoning is not required, but a concept plan amendment is. These are the review criteria for the land use amendment. Planning Commission did review this application and made a recommendation finding that the application complies with both the land use amendment review criteria and concept plan review criteria. So I've outlined in your packet more specifically on how these are achieved. The proposal appears to meet several goals, policies, and strategies of the LACP as currently adopted, including many goals from the housing as well as the land use and urban design chapters. The application did, of course, go through Development Review Committee review. DRC found that adequate capacity exists to serve the project. City traffic engineering does concur with the applicant's traffic study that the proposal can be accommodated into the greater roadway system. The amendment does not appear to affect the existing properties, primarily because they are vacant. It appears that the proposal can successfully be accommodated into the future plans as shown on the previous slide, the proposed concept plan. In terms of land supply, I just wanted to mention approximately 7% of the area within the Longmont planning area is currently designated high-density residential. Approximately 8% has some type of commercial designation. Of that, about 45% of the commercial land is currently vacant. About 44% of the regional commercial is vacant. That compares with about 18% of the high-density residential land being vacant, and some of that vacant land has development proposals on it currently. So in terms of a land supply, that's kind of what we're looking at. I think that was brought up last time. Moving on to the review criteria for the concept plan amendment. I'm not necessarily going to go through all of these because they're very similar to the ones that I just went through. But I think Planning Commission found that this proposal met the concept plan amendment review criteria as well as the land use review criteria. I'd be happy to go through these with you if you have questions. We did obviously send this to several referral agencies and received comments back from 3. CDOT provided comments that any new access to Highway 287 we would need to coordinate with them, and that additional analysis would likely be required. The St. John Valley School District provided comments that they support the proposal, and they indicated that sufficient capacity exists in the feeder system for this area. RTD also provided some
both general and specific site planning comments that we've passed along to both city traffic folks, transportation folks, as well as the applicant. And so they're kind of providing some general information on the park and ride that would be proposed for this area. We received a few comments from neighbors, primarily residents of Willis Heights, which is a county subdivision on the northwest corner of Highway 66 and 287 in Boulder County. Those residents did have some concerns about increased traffic and actually existing traffic and the speeds along Highway 287. Those emails are included as attachments to the Planning Commission packet in your materials. I have the Longmont housing market analysis here. We have Kathy Fedler here if you have questions specifically on that. She's the expert in that arena, so I'll defer those to her. The applicant's engineer is here as well if you have questions on any of the traffic study information that was looked at as part of this proposal. And I'm obviously here to answer questions. The Planning and Zoning Commission, as I mentioned, did consider this at their February 18th meeting. They recommended approval of this land use amendment and concept plan amendment, finding that both did meet the review criteria as outlined in the development code. So with that, I will answer questions at this time, or we can let the applicant do their presentation and then take questions, whatever I guess is your preference.
Does anybody have any questions at this point before we let the applicant speak?
I do.
Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
Aaron, where's the closest school?
Councilmember Christensen, Mayor Coombs, the closest school is likely not the school that is that this area is served by. This is in the Meade feeder system, and so these students that would live at this apartment complex, if approved, would attend Meade Elementary, Meade Middle, and Meade High. However, the school district has open enrollment, so students may choose to go to a different school in the district, potentially Alpine, Northridge, some other school within the district.
How far is that?
You know, I'd have to look at that and get back with you. I can look on my phone while we're waiting and provide that to you.
Any other questions?
So I'll ask the applicant, Scott with Inland Construction, to come down, and he has some brief remarks. Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and City Council. I'm Scott Morris with the Inland Group. Keith James is also with me, as is Todd Johnson with Caliber Engineering. Probably should be somewhat familiar to you, as it was 13 months ago that I stood before you on the Copper Mill project, which was a rezone, different than this, and was also unsuccessful. And it was at that night that we were told that we had the right project, but the wrong location. It was determined that it was just too impactful to the single family that was adjacent or in the vicinity, that there were concerns that traffic would be diverted through the neighborhood. It was determined that there was already multifamily in the neighborhood and that there was a recent tweak to the zoning that allowed that to happen. There was concerns that the property was being devalued, and there was a preference that the multifamily in Longmont be spread out versus concentrated in one area. Even though it seems like yesterday, and I have a great recollection of that meeting, I know this because I did review the video yesterday, and there was a universal message that was delivered from everyone on the council that said, we acknowledge the need for multifamily housing, we like the project, we encourage you to find another site, hopefully zoned multifamily, and that did not present the problems that you were faced 13 months ago. We believe that's exactly what we've done. We found a site where the underlying zoning allows high-density residential. Therefore, we're not here on a zone change today. We found a site that is adjacent to shopping and to open space, and importantly, not adjacent to single family. We found a site that is adjacent to arterials and allows access to the property without diverting through less intrusive uses. We found a site that is served by public transit. We found a site that has adequate public services and facilities to accommodate the project. and we found a site that does not adversely affect the adjacent properties. We believe we've done what you told us to do. We believe we've addressed the concerns that were raised, and we're back now with a project to hopefully address the shortage of multifamily housing inside of Longmont. Technically, we're here on a comp plan amendment and also to modify the annexation concept plan. I just want to make one note of that on the modification of the concept plan is that was always anticipated that it would have to be amended. When the Walmart did the annexation, the concept plan for the adjacent property was not sufficiently detailed, and the annexation plan says that any development next door would have to come back before City Council for a concept plan amendment. So it's not necessarily our use that's driving it. Any use would require that. We believe that we satisfied the review criteria for this land use action, and staff has determined that we also satisfy it, as has the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through each of those criteria because I know from experience that you've all done your homework and you're well versed in the issues before you. But I do want to point out some things that I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that I don't think are in dispute today. And that is, I don't think it can be disputed that this project is supported by the goals, policies, and strategies of the comprehensive plan. Any argument that there is not a housing demand or a need for this type of housing would simply, the data doesn't support that type of argument. I don't believe it can be disputed that there's not adequate water, sewer, and electrical utilities to serve the project. I don't believe it can be disputed that emergency services will not be adversely affected, or that the public schools have adequate capacity for the additional students that may reside in the community. I don't think it can be disputed that the project will not adversely affect the existing or planned use of the immediately adjacent property. In fact, I think you could argue that the rooftops will help spur the commercial development of this property that's been sitting vacant for quite some time. I don't think you can dispute that the project's in the immediate vicinity of grocery, retail, and shopping, of restaurants, and of employment centers. I don't think you can dispute that the area is served by public transportation. I don't think you can dispute that the project is adjacent to arterials and allows access without going through less intrusive uses. And I don't think you can dispute that there are adequate transportation and systems in place to accommodate the traffic from the project. I say this, and I want to let you know that I don't believe this is the low-hanging fruit. This is actually the majority of the review criteria that's before you in determining whether or not to approve this land use action. So the question is what's left, and I guess that we can go right to the locational criteria, which seems to be what is grabbed on. And I think we meet most of the locational criteria, if not all. Certainly, you could argue that we're not close enough to schools. And, the school district that that the project would feed into is not determined by us. It's determined by the school district. But in light of that, I think that there's a lot of mitigating factors in that the school district supports the project. The school district has adequate capacity, and the school district is committed to fully service the project with buses. You could also argue that the project is not close enough to parks. But I'll tell you that that's somewhat mitigated in that we would have a private kind of pocket park essentially inside of our site. And we have not yet started the site review plan, but we anticipate having a 1.18 acre green grass area inside that will contain an outdoor pool, barbecue areas, a playground and tot lot, and the rest just grass. So essentially a pocket park inside of the community. In light of the housing demand and the fact that the City Council previously kind of universally said that they liked the project, it was just in the wrong location. I hope this discussion will not focus on the couple of issues that you might say we don't fully meet, but rather on the vast majority that we completely satisfy as far as the review criteria. This is a great apartment site. Is it a perfect site? No, but I would argue that a perfect site does not exist. And We feel like we've addressed your concerns. We feel like we've satisfied the review criteria. Staff agrees, and the Planning and Zoning Commission agrees, and we hope you will too. We're here to answer your questions now or after the public hearing.
Do we have any questions at this point? Good presentation. Thank you. I will now open the public hearing on ordinance 2015-19. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this? Yeah, I guess I do. Let's see who signed up on that. We had Sandra Stewart.
Mayor Coombs, City Council members, I'm Sandra Stewart. I live at 1211 Twin Peaks Circle in Longmont. Whether the copper mill project is built or not, I would like to remind the council that it's only a start for relieving the great need of affordable housing in Longmont. Although it does supply some units for those at the upper end of poverty, it does not support the city's intention to focus on creating units that are 50% and below the area median income. According to the Times Call, there could be some units that would be categorized as affordable, but based on what we know about the project, a standard bedroom, one bedroom will rent about $1,081, which is pretty close to market rent. To be at 50% AMI, the rent would need to fall below $900. In order for this $1,081 unit to be affordable at 30% of the people's income, that person would need to make about $43,000 a year or be paid $20 an hour. Clearly, these units are not coming close to serving a very large portion of the working poor that the Hour Center and other agencies like the In-Between and FSC. It does not reach the disabled and the elderly on fixed incomes. Bottom line is that it's not truly affordable project given our perception of what is needed based on income of clients. The Hour Center has been seeing about 15 families per week for the last several months, seeking assistance for their utility bills because they have deferred that money to pay their high cost of rental housing. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Tim Rocco?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity. Like many of you, I wear several hats. I'm a realtor and rental property owner and understand the perspective from opponents to affordable housing as it relates to the city's role. However, today I speak to you on behalf of those struggling to find adequate accommodation. My name is Tim Rocco, as I mentioned, and I'm the interim executive director with the In-Between in Longmont. The Longmont agency, similar to us, in similar capacities, provide necessary supports for people with housing challenges. A growing burden for us has been finding safe and affordable housing options for those needing to exit our program. It has become increasingly difficult to transition our people into market rentals, creating a bottleneck for services. By now, we are all well aware of the need for thoughtful growth and expansion. My worry is that recent housing proposals I have seen are not reaching the populations most in need. Plans from Copper Peak, Summit Housing Group, and others I've seen are not, are proposing to add affordable apartment units in Longmont at 40, 50, and 60% area median income. Caution is, of course, needed when citing affordable per Boulder County area median income standards. I'll give you an example. We currently house a young mother of 2 children working at a retail store in town making $9.50 an hour, 40 hours a week. Her gross monthly income amounts to a little more than $1,600 a month. Despite her full-time employment, she will not qualify into most of these projects that are on the table, much less market rentals. She falls well below what is considered 30% area median income for a family of 3. So we encounter low-income earners like her in nearly every store and restaurant we enter in Longmont. She and many like her do not receive livable wages for their efforts. They do, however, contribute to our economy as consumers and taxpayers. There have been many studies and reports taken to this council in the past years citing the significant lack of truly affordable housing, particularly those who fall at 30% AMI or below. Longmont needs at least 2,500 additional affordable units to accommodate those low-income earners. I applaud the City of Longmont in supporting rehabilitative efforts like projects at 230 Kaufman, to keep truly affordable units available for the long term. In 2011, a 22-member Workforce Housing Task Force made recommendations encouraging the City Council to take steps. And I hope you'll take those well-written recommendations to find creative ways to apply them. I do believe it is our and the city's responsibility to help set the parameters to attract quality, affordable rental housing for those earning the 30% AMI or below. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this ordinance? Come on down.
James Kenwoody, 107 Caribou Place. I'd like to suggest that that Longmont really does need some housing, but there's a couple of details that I haven't seen any reference to, and one is solar panels on the roof. Building a complex like this without putting solar panels on that building is really behind the times and regressive. And another detail is some community gardens somewhere near that building. 214 units, 250 units, 25 community gardens, 10%. That would be a good asset for the building, for the community, for health, triple bottom line. And I'd just like to say again that solar panels would be a definite asset in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Chuck Thompson, 1616 Sumner Street. So I'm not on the clock?
Go ahead.
Because I wanted to ask, how come the developers and the proponents of this aren't on the clock and get all the time they want, and then we only get 3 minutes? There's no way that the city council can get the whole picture on this, the way it handles these situations. This city council does not have a clue what the setup is, because Harold Dominguez doesn't want you to know. This is basically like annexing all of that land that's covered by the concept plan. Walmart got the annexation of that land by fraud. There's a modification of the annexation agreement, but they only showed you 1 or 2 lines of the annexation agreement. You should look at that whole annexation agreement before you make a decision. But this is typical. Harold Dominguez wants you to make a decision without being informed. You better be real careful about this, because you got rope-a-doped into changing the ability of somebody to, the next step is a preliminary PUD. That's the big way the decisions are made on something like this. And because you got rope-a-doped by Dominguez and May into changing the development plan in such a way that it's impossible for a member of the public, no matter how stupid the Planning and Zoning Commission decision is, there's no way effectively anybody can appeal it. It used to be that the burden of proof on appeal was on the developer to prove that all of the criteria were met. And now that burden of proof has been completely flipped around, and there is no way that we could appeal the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I just want to ask, one of the criteria is that there have to be jobs near multifamily housing. And Walmart is right south of there. How many of those people at Walmart making $9 an hour are going to be able to afford to live in these apartments? You don't even know what the rent is going to be for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom or whatever. You have no idea whether there are jobs in the area or if there are even jobs in the city that would be enough income for somebody to live in those apartments. This is just the way the presentation, it was mechanical, uninspired, assembly line, and it reflected absolutely no love or concern for this city. This is just a stupid thing.
Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on this ordinance 2015-19? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any additional discussion? Councilmember Levison.
Yes, I'm curious. We have. It seems like we're going to set up kind of a situation here where, while the concept plan appears that there'll be perhaps the aspiration of additional retail, what's to say that we don't have another proposal to stick more housing here, and then, for Councilmember Moore's comment that then we again lose something that was in a former comp plan, that each end of the city should have these regional commercial centers to help anchor folks coming from outside the city to help support our tax growth.
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Levison, I think that there's really nothing to stop an application from being made to City Council. I think that that's something that would come to you similar to what's coming to you tonight, and then you would need to make a decision on that. The current proposal is to amend the concept plan for 12 acres, not the entire site. So the remaining 25 or so acres, in addition to the 40 acres where Walmart is, would remain regional commercial on the comp plan.
But we could have somebody come and chunk the next 12 acres of that 25 and then another 12 or 13 acres, right? There's nothing to say that this is the last piece of housing on this property.
I mean, I suppose that people can make application, a property owner can make application if they so choose, and that would come to City Council for a decision.
So I guess, I am quite concerned that this appears to be just a pod of housing in this, little pond or sea of regional commercial. And it does concern me that there's no neighborhood. There's no place for kids to interact with kids that don't live there. There's no place except for Walmart in a sea of parking for somebody to walk and do something or connect with the city. There's no belonging. So it is almost inconceivable to me that something that is seeming to be so poorly placed is actually meeting so many criteria of the comp plan. So it just makes me wonder, how much other kind of, bad design or bad placement of housing and other things we're going to have. And the other thing is, I'm really not happy that the school enrollment areas need, because again, how are those families and kids going to connect with Longmont if their school is in need? So I'm still disturbed that there's really no affordable housing. So I cannot support this proposal at all. I also think that the carrot enticing us that RTD will have 4 acres for a park and ride. RTD, we'd much rather have them invest their resources in what's going to be our central hub of transit, and they're really not going to be, investing way up there when all the regional buses are there at the north end of the King Super Shopping Center further south in this site. So I really don't find that much great in this, and it's disappointing that while the developers have checked off other boxes that we didn't like in this other location, this is still not a good location.
Councilmember Hogan.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Just wanted to point out that the paper made it sound like we're always at each other's throats, but I don't think so. I actually think it's a good idea. And first of all, I think there's a difference. We all understand, and we need to understand that there's a difference between affordable housing and affordable housing. I know that doesn't make sense, but on one hand, is the market rate of an apartment or a house in Longmont generally affordable. The other is, are we going to subsidize said rental rates in order to make it available at a price less than market rate so that people who are poor or in poverty can actually afford those affordable houses? I don't think that this particular development is of the second variety. We have not yet determined what we're going to do with our subsidized affordable housing. But nevertheless, we do need more high-density residential apartments. I'm also not, I share Councilmember Levison's concerns about kind of what's out there right now, but what better place to build an apartment before other people are there so that they're not complaining about, oh my gosh, I don't want to live next to an apartment. As a person who is proud to have a Walmart in Ward 1, I shop there frequently, and you can pretty much get anything you need at Walmart. I just think that it's a good fit. It'll help our community. It will lower the affordable rates of apartments, or make them more affordable, if not subsidized. And then, of course, just a shout out to say that we should not ignore the subsidized affordable housing issue. I had it described. I was having lunch with a constituent, and he said, "You got a problem." He says, "You got a hole you got to fill, and you got a bucket of sand, but the problem is that bucket of sand is not going to fill that hole. So your choices are, pour your entire bucket into the hole, and maybe it'll get a little more shallow, but we're never going to meet demand. Or you can do nothing, which doesn't help those folks that you could probably help with your bucket. Or you can take the bucket and put it on top of the hole." And I said, "What in the world does that mean?" And he says, "You guys need to figure out a way to designate X amount of dollars or something from some source that will then go to a dedicated subsidized affordable housing program. Because we're never going to meet the need. It'll never be available for 100% of the people, because by definition, if it's being offered below market, it will never reach its full capacity. But we need to do something. So we should probably start thinking, and I would encourage us all to have a discussion at some point to talk about what it would mean to take our bucket of sand and put it on top of the hole, so we can stop spending time arguing about it when we all agree that it's a need. So the question becomes, what do we do? But that is a different question than whether or not we're going to allow them to build, which I think we should.
Councilmember Christensen.
Well, I actually agree with both of you to a degree. And I guess I would just like to have a conversation sometime about affordable housing on a level that is more realistic. But what we're talking about, and maybe this is not the time to have this, because we're talking about just housing. I don't think any of this is actually affordable, because at $8.50 an hour, which is the Colorado minimum wage, that makes $17,000 a year if you're working full-time, or $14.16 a month, and that assumes you're not paying any taxes. So the minimum wage worker will have, if they paid for that one-bedroom studio apartment at $1,081, they would have $335 left over at the end of the month for everything. That's assuming they don't have to pay taxes. So when we have these discussions about affordable housing and low-income housing, we actually need to discuss things not in terms of the median family income, because 25% of U.S. households right now live alone. Those are people on the low end, who are just young and just getting started, they're not married, and people who are elderly and have lost their spouses and they're living alone. And that does not include the 12 million households that are headed by single parents who have a minimum of one other person, so that's another 24 million people. So put that 75 million people and 24 million people together, you have nearly a third of the families, a third of the households in this country are either living alone or single parent households. That's a huge amount, and we're not even talking about them. We're just talking as if everyone was a family household with double income. That's why we have a problem, is that we aren't even discussing things in practical terms. When we do sit down and have this discussion, we need to remember that a third of something like 1 in 5 children in America live in poverty. So I think this development, these guys sound like very good builders. I mean, what they presented to us before was attractive. These are reasonable houses. We need housing of all kinds. But the idea that having housing is going to lower rent. Has anyone in this room ever had their rent lowered? Nobody ever gets their rent lowered. So we need to discuss this in more realistic terms. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'd have to disagree with you a little bit. Market forces, when there's an oversupply, rents do lower. When there is, I'm a landlord. I remember it was hard to rent out a 3-bedroom apartment for $900 a few years ago when there was an oversupply. So what you're saying, it does not make economic sense to me, because supply and demand controls rents. Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Councilmember Bagley, it's interesting with a new reporter. We're always at each other's throats for some reason. We all like each other, but we do have difference of opinions. But I think sensationalism news sells newspapers. The one thing that we also have to look at, and we're completely getting off topic of Copper Peak instead of affordable housing, is that we live in Boulder County. We live to tax ourselves to oblivion, which taxes the owner of the property, who passes along that to the consumer. We can tax. We tax for this, we tax for that, we tax for this. It's needs and wants. People of Boulder County want certain things, and they vote and they tax themselves. So our rents raise to, I would say, almost Denver levels potentially. Is that good? Probably not. So when we have this conversation of affordable housing, we also need to look at the county we live in. As I've mentioned to other people, Boulder County is expensive dirt. Move 1 mile over, just a little bit past County Road 1. If you want to live in Weld County, it's less expensive, but you can get a lot more for your money than you can in Boulder County. I'm having difficulty with some of the comments that were made earlier by members of council that poor development. This is a poor development. I don't see that. We have. Did any member of council want to buy this property before? You wanted to buy this? I said, did any member of council wanted to buy this property before? Okay. Anybody in the public want to spend that kind of money to do that? This isn't public comment. You know what I don't understand. There's order. I'd like to have order, please.
We have the council member speaking, so please.
You've had your 3 minutes. But everybody. There's always folks that have conditions of what they want to see. We all have conditions what we like to see in development, and whether you like it or not, whether it's water rates or what have you. There's 7 members of council who are doing their best to try to make the best decisions for Longmont, whether you like it or not. Some people do and some people don't. So I've moved ordinance 2015-19.
Second. Council members, Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Well, there's one thing we're not going to argue about, and that's housing. We need more of it. And I think that this is probably, while it does take retail off the table, if we let this move forward, that we're going to end up with more housing as the byproduct, which, there's always trade-offs, there's always considerations to be made. I'd like to refer back to Keith James' letter to Planning and Zoning, February 4th, 2015, that they're talking about households earning less than 60% of median income. There was a statement in there that says that they may be willing to set aside 11% of the units for households earning less than 50% of AMI. In my mind, that would go a long ways towards selling this project if that may return to will. And that would definitely address some of the concerns around affordable housing, and it would also make it easier for me to move this project forward. So that would be my suggestion to the developer. Thank you.
Okay, I guess now we've got a motion that's been seconded. Unless the developer wants to respond to, sure. Sure. Yeah. Councilmembers, Levison, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Is this considered one of the gateway entryways into the city? And wouldn't we have had to give notice for the project further than just the neighborhood? I guess that's what I had a question of. Because is this not considered a gateway property, the whole 40 acres?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Levison, I don't know that I mean, it is a gateway. It's an entrance to the city, so yes. But there's no...
And there wouldn't be more, I mean, I thought there were
land development
advanced design criteria and stuff too.
You may be referring to the scenic entry corridor, and so that really comes into play at more of a site planning level. Okay. The development code requires the 750-foot notice, which is what this project complied with.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Keith James. I'll first answer your question and then hopefully provide a little more information if allowed. The may can and will become a will. We're happy to do that. Our current numbers in our current plan does include about 11% of the units set aside at 50% of AMI, with the balance at 60% of AMI. And relative to rents, I wanted to point out that our proposed rents are actually all at about the 50% rent level. I think they stretch up to about 52%. So interestingly, we could come in with an all 50% project, but it limits the incomes of the folks allowed to live there, which just limits the pool in a market with such tight occupancy, tight vacancy. It really doesn't make sense. Now, it's not to say if rents continue to go crazy, if we're at 60, there's room to move the rents up over time, as any landlord will tell you is certainly in the future potentially. But our rents, as planned, are 50 to 52%, and that equates to an $850 to an $885 rent for one bedrooms. Still not affordable to that $850 an hour employee, but it's affordable to the starting school teacher in St. Vrain Valley. It's affordable to the starting firefighter for the city. And it's certainly affordable to that service worker in a two wage earner household. Then rents on the 2 bedrooms are approximately $1,000 to about $1,075, and on the 3 bedrooms about $1,175 to $1,255. Those are about 20 to 28% discount from what we thought the market was, which is kind of a market average supported by a market study just completed. Compared to brand new units on the market, they're substantially below that. They're in the 35 to 40% discount to brand new, comparably appointed units.
Okay. Address your concerns? Okay, we've got a motion. It's been seconded. Let's vote. Okay, it passes 6-1 with Councilmember Levison dissenting.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is ordinance 2015-20, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of 2 easements on Lot 1, Block 1, Hover West 4th filing, generally located south of 3rd Avenue Place and west of Hover Street. There is not a planned staff presentation, but Ben Ortiz is here to address questions.
Okay, is there any questions for council before I open up the public hearing on this? Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on ordinance 2015-20. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move ordinance 2015-20.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0.
Your next item is the annual performance report to the community on the 2014 Community Development Block Grant and Home Programs and public hearing to obtain comments. Kathy Fedler will start this presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kathy Fedler, Housing Community Investment Manager, and I'm here tonight to give you the update on our 2014 CAPER, Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for the CDBG Home Affordable Housing Programs, and I've actually thrown in some information on the CDBG DR program as well, grant that we're operating. On the CDBG program, we have received over $580,000 in grant funds in 2014, an additional $55,000 in program income. $971,700 was under contract or committed this year, and our expenditures as a percent of the contract or committed funds was about 57%. We had unspent funds at the end of 2014 of $720,000, and that includes reallocated unprogrammed funds of $250,000 that we reallocated as part of the upcoming 2015 budget. On the funds that were expended this year, about 40, oh gosh, here, wait a minute, let me get to a bigger, about 48%, no, 10% of the funds spent this year were in the area of community investment programs. We didn't spend any funds this year on economic development programs. 59% of the funds were spent on housing programs and about 6% on neighborhood revitalization programs in 2014. And then the rest was on administration. The total unspent funds of $466,000 that you can see at the bottom of the screen there, added to the $250,000 of reallocated funding, totals that $720,000 of funds unspent at the end of 2014, which just means that as we get into 2015 and start spending funds, we should be able to lower that unspent rate next year. The Community Development Block Grant Program in 2014 leveraged about $2.98 for every $1 of CDBG funds that were spent. We met our 20% admin cap, and we benefited over 10,700 persons this year. 99% were low and moderate income persons, 28% minorities, 9% elderly, and about 3.5% of the folks had disabilities. Direct beneficiaries, we served about 31 low-income families. They received free internet or computers under the Digital Divide program. We funded the salary for the Suite Supportive Services Manager, which is that Housing First program that puts homeless folks into permanent housing. 67 low-income households in Longmont had their homes repaired. That's through emergency grants, architectural barrier program, mobile home repair program, and general rehab for homeowners. 14 homeless persons moved into permanent housing. We continued the design of the Lanyon and Spangler parks, and those actual implementation of those parks improvements will be conducted in 2015. And 26 businesses have been assisted to date, creating 26 full-time jobs and 17 part-time jobs, even though we didn't provide direct assistance to any businesses in 2015 or 2014. They're still continuing to create jobs. Since 1984, we have received over $14.6 million in CDBG grant funds and $1.8 million in program income. We've spent $15.9 million, over 96% of the total funds available. And over that whole time period since 1984, 95% of all funds benefited low and moderate income folks. The legal size sheet that's at your desk is a summary of the program to date. So it's more of the global look at that, and is what we're going to be using for the CD Week event or the promotion that's coming up next week. So that is additional information. On the home program, we received about $216,000 in home funds and another $30,000 in program income in 2014. $594,000 was under contract or committed, and our expenditures totaled $517,000 for an 87% expenditure rate. Unspent funds at the end of 2014 totaled $235,000. We reallocated the unprogrammed funds of $158,000 for 2015 expenditures. So again, we should be getting back in line and getting our expenditures back up again in 2015. We leveraged 11 cents for every dollar of home funds that were spent. We met the 10% administrative cap, assisted over 60 persons, all of whom were low moderate income persons, 25% of whom were minorities, and 58% were elderly. And then more direct provision of assistance under the home program. 7 homeless persons were moved into permanent housing. 35 elderly residents at St. Vrain Manor had their tubs replaced with walk-in showers so they can age in place, and we're done with that project. We have done replaced every tub at St. Vrain Manor, so they're all ready to go. 17 households at 230 Kaufman benefited from new siding and insulation and replacement of their elevated walkways, which were quite dangerous. Since 2007, we've received a little over $2 million in home grant funds and about $178,000 in program income, and we have spent over $1.9 million to date. On the Affordable Housing Fund, about $9.6 million has been received in direct funding and revolved funds as loans repaid through 2014. In 2014, we budgeted $399,000 for projects. Expenditures totaled $330,000, which is a 97% expenditure rate. The funds uncommitted available at the end of 2014 is $87,000. So that, with the projects that we allocated funding for 2014 and 2015, we have a very low balance in the Affordable Housing Fund right now. We did leverage $1.92 for every dollar of Affordable Housing Fund spent. We assisted 73 persons, all of whom were low and moderate income, and 68% were elderly. Land was purchased by Habitat to build up to 5 townhomes in Poplar Grove with funding, and the elevator at Aspen Meadows Senior Apartments was updated. On the flood recovery grant, if you remember, we received about $2.7 million in CDBG-DR grant funding directly from the state for housing assistance, and we received a $60,000 grant from the Longmont Community Foundation. So far, we have assisted 62 households at $1.1 million spent. 30 of those folks received rent assistance. 1 received down payment assistance. They actually have purchased a home. 10 had their mobile homes moved to other locations, and 21 had their mobile homes replaced. We have 17 households still in process with about $900,000 committed. 1 would receive rent assistance, 2 are under down payment assistance, 8 under the mobile home replacement, and 6 under home repairs, and another 12 households applications are in the pipeline, 6 down payment assistance, 4 home repair, and 2 mobile home replacements. And I have to say that not the majority, but probably at least 40% of the folks under the down payment assistance are coming from Lyons. They're not necessarily purchasing in Longmont, but Lyons residents are taking advantage of that down payment assistance program. And then on the sub-allocation that we're trying to get in round 2 funding, Boulder County has, as you know, joined together to form a collaborative. We commissioned and completed an unmet needs assessment, which looked at all of the damages in all the communities in the county, and then deducted funding that was already made available, already applied for, already received, and what is left is the unmet need. We did look particularly at what would projects that would be CDBG-DR eligible in that, as well as other projects that are more resiliency related, because communities can use this unmet needs assessment to try and attract additional funding, as well as CDBG-DR funding. What it showed was there was almost $1 billion of unmet need countywide remaining at the bottom. You can see the different categories that the unmet needs are in, and it totaled almost $1 billion, just under $1 billion. Based on the total housing and infrastructure need, the following percentages will be used to allocate funds that we received in the sub-allocation between the two activities. And we're only looking at two activities because the state chose to only pull out funding from housing and from infrastructure to make up the sub-allocation that the county is eligible to receive. So that's the two categories of projects that we can fund from there. And so the allocation would be split 22% for housing projects and 78% for infrastructure, creeks, and special district projects. Using those percentages then and applying it to the sub-allocation that we're eligible for, we would have about 63 million is the total allocation. About 47 million would go for infrastructure projects, 78%, and 49 million would go for infrastructure, and about 13 million for housing projects. Of the infrastructure, this is what the slide is. Of the infrastructure, we would anticipate giving each of the participating jurisdictions about $250,000 off the top that they could use to meet their local match, their most high priority need, and that's the $2.25 million. And then the remaining balance would be on more of a competitive application type basis for infrastructure projects, looking particularly at making sure we meet the low moderate income standards that are set, that the projects meet all the other requirements. So that is what we would be looking at distributing in the infrastructure as we move into the sub-allocation. On the housing side, 13.9 million, or 22% of the sub-allocation, is targeted to housing projects. We set aside about 5.7 million for the Lions replacement housing project, which, as you know, is on hold right now, but that's still our highest priority. So we'll figure out a way to fund something. If it's not in round 2, we will do some type of swap and do it in round 3. And then 1.7 million for a Boulder project that had already been approved by the state Division of Housing. So that needs to be funded. So that would leave about 8.2 million for housing in the sub-allocation. And we are looking at splitting that out between temporary rent assistance again, down payment assistance, housing home repair and replacement, clearance and demolition if needed, and home access. So that is when roads and bridges that go to homes that have been washed out, the house may be fine, they can't even access the house because of the roads and bridges. That's the home access program. And that'll be primarily operated in the county. We didn't have any of that here in Longmont. Right now we're taking public comment. It runs through April 20th. Again, the unmet needs assessment, partial action plan, and public comments will be submitted to the state by the 1st of May. The state will publish what's called a partial action plan for 7 days of comments at the state level, and then they'll include that our action plan in their second substantial amendment submission to HUD, which they plan to submit on or around May 13th, May 15th. HUD has 45 days then to review and get back, and then hopefully at that point we will be working through contractual situations with the state to get that sub-allocation into the county and back out to the community. So I did also want to mention, before we go into the comments or take any questions, I did also put at your seats a timeline for the housing assessment and update. As Council Member Bagley, this is the bucket to put on top of the hole, figuring out how to work through that. So it does outline what we're working on with the consultant right now and kind of where we anticipate what kind of questions we're going to answer, and then how we're be coming back to council. We're anticipating right now coming and giving you an update at after the first 3 steps at the May 12th study session, then going back and doing additional work depending on what we hear from that, and then coming back to you at the June 30th study session. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those as well. So I think that's all I have. So any questions, I'd be happy, or you can do the public hearing.
Any questions for Karen before I open the public hearing? Councilmember Christensen.
I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for the detailed explanations of everything and also for all the incredible work you do. It's astonishing. You're a wizard, and thank you for all you do for the community.
I think we all feel that way. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing on this for public comment. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to come down and speak on the 2014 Community Development Block Grant and Home Programs? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move that we authorize submission of this report to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote.
Got it?
Okay, that passes 7-0. So why don't we take a 5-minute recess? seats and continue our meeting, please? Thank you.
Mayor Coombs, are you ready for consent?
Yes.
Item 9A is ordinance 2015-21, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 15, Chapters 1504, 1505, 1510, and Appendix B of the Longmont Municipal Code concerning wireless telecommunications facilities. The public hearing and second reading is scheduled for April 14th. Item 9B is ordinance 2015-22, a bill for an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the water supply agreement with Hunt Feed Yard Incorporated. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for April 14th, 2015. Item 9C is resolution 2015-22, authorizing an agreement between the city and George E. Leupold Family Trust for the purchase of real property for the Button Rock Preserve watershed. Item 9D is resolution 2015-23, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for Youth Corps program services in 2015. Item 9E is resolution 2015-24, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for a lease of the Boulder County Fairgrounds for July 4th fireworks display. And staff would like to pull item 9A for a short presentation.
Okay. Councilmember Levison?
I just want to pull 9B for a quick correction.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Ready? Okay, Mayor, members of council.
Motion to pass consent?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. Councilmember Santos?
No problem, Mayor. The only thing I want to say about 9D is that when Youth Corps goes up, I'd like to go up with them and help them out at Button Rock, if that ever, Dale.
Yeah.
We tried before, so other members of council wants to go. I know I want to go. I'm one. So I move the consent agenda minus A and B.
All right, let's vote the consent agenda minus A and B. That passes 7-0.
And Ben Ortiz is here to present the first item.
Mayor, members of council, Ben Ortiz, Planning and Development Services. Tonight, staff is sorry, having some difficulty here. Hang on. All right, I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Sorry. Staff is proposing amendments to several sections of the Land Development Code, including Table 1504-A, Table of Principal Uses, 15.04-040, Temporary Uses, 1505.170, Wireless Telecommunications, 15.10.020, Definitions, and then Title 15, Appendix B, which outlines the submittal requirements for telecommunications development applications. Staff did consult with several city departments, including Longmont Power and Communications, Building Inspection, Public Works, and City Attorney's Office, and held a study session with the Planning and Zoning Commission in September of last year. Staff also sought feedback from telecommunication providers, the Neighborhood Group Leaders Association, and at a public meeting to which the entire city was invited. And staff, while the proposed code amendments were made available to the Neighborhood Group Leaders Association, they did provide us with no feedback, and only 2 people attended the citywide public meeting. The individuals that attended were by and large supportive of the city with its code amendments. So the first section of the code we made amendments to is Table 1504-A, Table of Principal Uses, which is shown in your packet as Exhibit A. We're proposing to remove freestanding wireless telecommunication facility as a use category and replace it with alternative tower structures, monopoles, and lattice towers. Alternative tower structures are wireless telecommunication alternative tower structures are a wireless telecommunication tower designed to look like something else. Some examples include a clock or a bell tower, a pine tree, a palm tree, a cross, or a cactus. It's been our intent to incentivize the use of alternative tower structures versus monopoles and lattice towers by making the process less onerous in the non-residential zoning districts, or by allowing them in residential zoning districts where freestanding wireless telecommunication facilities are currently not allowed. And I just wanted to show you briefly here where the mouse is. You'll see the freestanding wireless telecommunication facilities, and that encompasses both alternative tower structures, or the stealth towers, and the monopoles and the lattice towers. We're also proposing to change the building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities, remove them as conditional uses, and turn those into limited uses. And then the remainder will remain largely the same, with the exception of the agricultural zoning district. We've also added a new category, which I'll talk about a little later, which is rooftop-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities. Currently, those are folded in with building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities. We've also added a new category for small cell facilities, and then amateur radio facilities. So the amendments to Chapter 15.04.04, or temporary uses, are also proposed and would allow cell on wheels, otherwise referred to as COWs. COWs are temporary cellular facilities frequently attached to a truck or trailer and are meant to provide cellular service for a fixed period of time. We're proposing to allow COWs in all zoning districts for a period not to exceed 180 days, which may be renewed by the Planning and Development Services Director at their discretion. COWs would need to meet minimum setback requirements equal to the height of the facility or the height of structures in the applicable zoning district, whichever is greater. We're proposing to allow 60-foot tall COWs in industrial zoning districts and 50-foot tall COWs in all other districts. Landscaping and screening may be required at the director's discretion when adjacent or nearby properties may be impacted. COWs would be subject to site plan review, but we're proposing to give the director the ability to waive this requirement.
Councilmember Levison?
Ben, one of the things that I did not see in the packet was for the cell on wheels, the temporary structures, are they going to be required to do, would they be on public property? They'd be on private property. If they're on public property, would they have to have a use of public places? And would they have to then, also conform to, they can't really be there 180 days if they're on the street because of our requirement that things get moved. So would they ever be on public property?
Mayor, Councilmember Levison, so by and large, we're contemplating that they would go on private property. However, the scenario in which you paint, which they could go on public property, is certainly likely, in which case they would be required to get a use of public places permit. Of course, the site that the cow provider would select would have to be reviewed and approved by city staff, and if it's not one that is such as being parked on the right-of-way, for example, we would recommend an alternative site in that scenario, unless of course there's no other location for it. But I believe the service area for these, they are regarded as a macro facility, so I think that their coverage area is fairly large. So I think that they would have quite a bit of latitude in terms of where they could potentially locate.
And so I'm not really being facetious, but in the case of cow tipping, if they're 50 feet high, we do have to consider not just setbacks, but if they happen to tip over, then would there be additional requirements to be far enough away from, structures and wires and all that kind of stuff? And would that fall in the same review criteria with kind of a site plan?
Mayor, Councilmember Levison, yes, of course. We did have a cow structure that went up recently by the old Butterball plant, and it was required to meet setback requirements equivalent to the height of the structure itself. And one of the other things that was required is that it needs to meet a 100-mile-per-hour wind load. So they needed to provide plans that were stamped by a professional engineer, guaranteeing that this would be safe and meet wind load requirements. That particular facility was in fact guyed, and because it's temporary, they chose not to sink piers into the ground, but what they used were jersey barriers as anchors, and then the guy wires were connected to the actual facility as well as the jersey barrier. And when the building inspection department reviewed the application, they reviewed it for wind load requirements, and it was indeed stamped by a professional engineer.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to 1505.170A, there's a lot of nitty-gritty in this section, so I'm only going to go over the big ticket items. We deleted the provision allowing the city to permit the co-location of wireless telecommunication facilities on property designated as historic landmark. And this old section is contrary to some new language in the code, which I'll talk about later. We strengthened the language on co-location. Currently, co-location is encouraged. We're proposing to require co-location when other co-locatable facilities exist. We're also proposing to exempt the co-location requirements for operators that utilize unlicensed national infrastructure, or UNI, radio band as their primary service frequencies. All of the licensed carriers have frequencies that no other provider can use. So co-location isn't a problem for the licensed providers. The smaller providers that use the uni radio band are more likely to suffer interference if they're required to co-locate. Wireless telecommunication facilities installed in the right-of-way, such as street lighting poles or emergency communication facilities, were previously limited in height to the structure height of the zoning district in which they were located. We're proposing to allow them to be installed to a height no greater than 50 feet. And this is to encourage the use of existing infrastructure rather than building new towers or cluttering up building rooftops. replacement or upgrade antennas, support structures, etc., that don't increase overall height, mass, or width of an existing wireless telecommunication facility would be exempt from land use review under Title 15 and would be subject only to the issuance of building permits. Colors of replacement and upgrade equipment would need to be consistent with the building or facility on which the equipment is mounted. This section provides greater clarity with respect to development standards for towers. For example, under the current code, it's not clear whether the setback is measured from the middle of the tower or the edge of the tower. Since lattice towers, for example, can be pretty wide, we propose to establish the setback measurement from the edge of the tower to the nearest property line. Height for freestanding wireless telecommunication facilities is based on the maximum structure height for buildings in the applicable zoning district, except that alternative tower structures can be up to 50 feet. And this is a carrot designed to incentivize the use of alternative tower structures instead of monopoles and lattice towers. In all the non-residential zoning districts, structure height is limited to 45 feet, except in the CBD, where the buildings that front onto Main Street can be as high as 50 feet. In the rail park zone, maximum structure height is also 45 feet, but under very limited circumstances, structures can be 60 feet. The design of towers requires that they be able to accommodate co-location and that antennas be flush mounted to towers unless flush mounting the antenna is technically infeasible. In addition, new code language was added prohibiting the artificial lighting of towers unless federal regulation require it. Lastly, visual impacts of the tower and equipment shelter would need to be mitigated through things like landscaping, making the structures architecturally compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods, and painting towers a neutral color. So under the existing code, building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities are not allowed on buildings with residential uses. And the new code proposes to change this by allowing building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities on multifamily buildings constructed under Chapter 16.04, and that's the International Building Code. We consulted the building department on the issue, and they stated that commercial uses on structures constructed out of the International Residential Code, such as single-family residential or townhomes, isn't permitted. The new code would allow building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities to be attached to an existing penthouse or equipment shelter or enclosure, but antennas would not be able to encroach above the penthouse or equipment enclosure. It would be further required that antennas would need to be fully screened from view, compatible with the existing building design, colors, and materials. And the new code would prohibit new installations of wireless telecommunications equipment on or in a structure inside of a historic district or within 250 feet of the boundary of a historic district, or on or in structures that are designated as a National Historic Landmark or listed or eligible for listing in the National Register. So under the current code, building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities and rooftop-mounted wireless telecommunication facilities are one and the same. We're proposing to break these up into two separate categories, building-mounted and roof-mounted. The roof-mounted facilities would only be allowed if a building or structure-mounted facility is inadequate or technically infeasible, or if a roof-mounted facility would have less of an aesthetic impact than that of a structure-mounted facility. The new code would prohibit rooftop-mounted facilities on buildings with pitched roofs, because juxtaposed by the roof behind them, they would stick out like a sore thumb. The new code would allow panel and microwave antennas to extend no more than 10 feet above the parapet of the roof or the structure to which they are mounted. Under the existing code, which was written back in 1996, the height limit for panel antennas above the top of a roof or parapet was limited to 5 feet. In 1996, the standard panel antenna was 4 feet in height, and the current 5-foot restriction allows for the height of the typical 4-foot panel antenna, as well as the ability to provide a foot of clearance from the rooftop. In communicating with telecommunications providers, they state that the new 8-foot panel antennas require 2 feet of clearance from the rooftop. And this is why we're requesting a 10-foot height limit of the antennas. Whip antennas, which were previously allowed to be 10 feet, We are proposing to allow them to be 12 feet in height. Whip antennas are much less innocuous than panel antennas, as they look like a thin pole. And in the 8 years I've been in this department, I've never seen a request for a wireless whip antenna. And the installation of penthouses for screening purposes would be allowed, and it's proposed to restrict the cumulative floor area of a penthouse or penthouses to more than 25% of the building roof area. And this is to ensure that we don't change the fundamental character of the building. And we've already discussed restrictions on co-location on residential buildings and the restrictions of new facilities being installed in a historic district or within 250 feet of a historic district, so I won't go into this further. So we folded in some new language on small cells into the existing wireless mesh networking facilities code, and small cell facilities are much smaller than the macro facilities. Like the larger building-mounted panel antennas and towers, are designed primarily to fill in the small gaps in service. Due to their size, small cells are going to be far less innocuous than the macro facilities. In a nutshell, small cells would be allowed in any zoning district, and an applicant would be allowed to file a single consolidated application for multiple small cells in a single network consistent with state law. We would, however, restrict the installation of small cell and wireless mesh facilities on traffic light poles, and that is they could only go onto the luminaire arm, and this assumes that they don't interfere with traffic signal systems. So amateur radio towers and amateur radio operations are currently regulated in Chapter 9. Chapter 9 spells out things like maximum tower height, which is 60 feet, and that the Land Development Code regulations are applicable. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the Land Development Code that speaks directly to amateur radio facilities and operations, so we took the opportunity to address two recurring questions, setback requirements and where a tower cannot be placed. And side yard setbacks are based on 1 foot for every 2.5 feet of structure height, and rear yard setbacks are spelled out in Table 1505-A and 1505-B for residential and non-residential developments respectively. Amateur radio towers aren't allowed between the front of the building and the front yard setback for obvious aesthetic reasons. And this section would require the director to administratively approve any request to modify an existing tower or base station that doesn't substantially change the physical dimensions of the tower or the base station. And this section gives authority to the director to expedite review of a wireless telecommunication application as required to meet federal guidelines and limitations on the amount of time the city may take to review applications. And 11 new definitions were added to 15.10.020, and the existing definition for building or structure-mounted wireless telecommunication was amended to eliminate references to the roof or top of structure and co-locating on existing freestanding wireless telecommunication facilities. A separate definition for rooftop-mounted wireless telecommunication facility was created. And this section simply outlines the submittal requirements for wireless telecommunications development applications. In a nutshell, an application would be comprised of a site plan, a letter to the Development Review Committee, a radio frequency compliance letter, an engineering report, and an ownership and encumbrance report. And staff presented the proposed code amendments to the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 18th, and we requested a recommendation to City Council, which is reflected in the attached Planning and Zoning Resolution, PZR 2015-2A. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the proposed code amendments without conditions or amendments. And that concludes my presentation. And if you have questions, I would be happy to try and answer those now.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Hey, Ben. Recent activity at the FCC talked about when companies come in and want to change the size or replace the equipment, they have limitations on the size. You know, say they can go up by 10% or up to 10 feet. Is that being addressed in this particular code amendment?
Mayor, Councilmember Moore, yes, indeed. There's previous iterations of the code had some very specific language that addressed exactly that. But it was fairly long and fairly complicated, and it was derived from a 150-page federal order that was recently published in, I believe, early January. So in consultation with the city attorney's office, it was their recommendation that we put in a catch-all paragraph that alludes to the federal 150-page order rather than try to specifically capture that language that you reference. And the concern was that there will be court challenges in the future that may upend some of these federal regulations, or that the federal regulations themselves may change down the road. And so given that 150-page order, we were not comfortable specifically spelling out those particular items that you mentioned.
I just want to make sure that we're covered, but there are certain things that we specifically cannot deny. And are we in a position where we can capture those particular applications?
Mayor, Council Member Moore, yes, we are in a position to capture those.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Ben, you always get the good ones. I move ordinance 2015-21.
And moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosen.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. It may be slow for me to find exactly on this ordinance 2015-22. I've had trouble getting my Dropbox off, and what I'm looking at is not highlighted from the work I did at home. So I just had a little bit of confusion because in part of the paperwork, I saw a date of 2024, and the council communication talks about an original 20-year lease period that began in 2008. So I'm wondering, what date are we going to use? And I think that the 2024 date I found in the actual agreement, and I'm trying to find the page quickly. Yes, it's page 2 of the agreement, and it's not lined. It's about the, it's under section 3. To section, and then note section 5, term, current agreement replaced with the following language. It shall be from April 28th, 08 through April 28th, 2024. So is there some anomaly here? Can we count?
Mayor, Councilmember Levinson, Ken Houston, Water Resources Manager with the Public Works Natural Resources Department. When we had originally entered into the agreement with Hunt Feed Yards, it was a 20-year agreement from 2008 to 2028. As part of this amendment, water boards kind of given us bounds on leases, and we're trying to keep all leases to 10-year terms. And so as part of the negotiation for this amendment, one of the things we required was that the original length of lease, which went to 2028, would also be amended to 2024, so 14 to 24, to make it a 10-year lease from the time we enter into it. So the 2024 date is correct, yes.
And I also wanted to just note that is it a pretty standard part of our other water lease agreements that we're told by the person who we're in the agreement with how much water they'll need, or is this something in particular at Hunt Feed Yard that they notify us by October, 2 months before the next calendar year, how much water they're going to need and the monthly schedule of delivery?
Yeah, that's actually fairly common in almost all of the water supply agreements. What we really are doing is entering into a lease of a set amount of water per year, and then in the agreements we try to estimate leaseor tries to estimate as best as we can that actual release schedule on a monthly basis. Because usually these are used for augmentation plans, those release schedules can change, primarily because if you hit a stretch of free river, they don't need to use that water, so they'll keep it for later in the season. So generally what happens is at the start of each water year, they give us a new schedule, which we then, if we can meet it, then we will meet it.
And our bare minimum, they're going to have to at least keep to the minimum that they've agreed to in the lease, so that we have some guaranteed minimum level of income coming in.
That is correct, yeah. We really aren't interested in super tiny leases.
Thanks.
Councilman Livingston?
Yes, I didn't know if anybody else had any questions, so I'd like to move, I can't actually find the
Ordinance 22.
ordinance 2015-22. I'm moving that.
Okay, I'll second that. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is General Business 11A, Settlement of Kerr-McGee Gathering LLC versus City of Longmont lawsuit regarding existing oil and gas pipelines on the Hartman open space. And Dan Kramer, our Assistant City Attorney, will make this presentation.
Let me get a page. Let me know.
355. 355 or 355. It's 359.
That's 359.
Yeah, 359.
Mayor and Council, if you're ready, Dan Kramer, City Attorney's Office, here to talk with you about the Kerr-McGee settlement proposal. A little bit of context. This is the oil and gas world we're living in right now. The regulations that Council passed in July of 2012 are still in effect. Those were challenged by the state and the industry, and after the governor called on the state agency to dismiss that lawsuit, they did. That lawsuit was dismissed with a covenant not to sue on those same claims. So those regulations currently are not being challenged. They include, for example, a restriction against drilling or having any oil and gas facilities in a residential zoning district in the city. The citizens passed Article 16 of the Charter in November of 2012. The district court invalidated that charter amendment, but stayed that order for appeal. The city has been fighting that appeal. We filed opening briefs. The industry and the state and top operating company filed answer briefs, and we are currently working on a reply brief. That's due on the 9th. The city's contract with top operating company is still in effect, giving top operating well site locations within the city, but that has been put on ice by top and the city mutually to await for the outcome of the challenge to Article 16. And in January of last year, the city agreed to give Synergy Resources Corporation road access across city land to reach a drill site outside the city. Synergy, in return, agreed to a number of restrictions, including agreeing to the water monitoring provisions of our regulations that they would have had to comply with if they were operating in the city. They also agreed not to frack underneath the city. And according to them in deposition, they did not frack under the city, even though they are drilling and have drilled beneath the city. Which brings us to this next item. The Hartman open space which the city purchased in 2003. This is on the far northeastern side of the city, northeast of Union Reservoir, the most northeastern property within city limits. And if you can see that red line, that is the pipeline route on the northeasternmost portion of that property. The lawsuit by Kerr-McGee against the city originated based on this right-of-way grant, made in 1984 by predecessors both to Kerr-McGee and to the city. A few things about this grant. First, it predates city ownership by 19 years. It gave the pipeline company the ability to put 3 pipelines into the ground on a strip of land 50 feet wide. The pipelines were put into the ground subsequent to that 1984 agreement. They are still in the ground, a pre-existing use on the property. And according to the terms of the grant, there is no end date listed on that grant. Those pipelines could, in theory, be in the ground indefinitely. The dispute arose when Kerr-McGee approached the city saying they wanted to replace the pipelines as part of a larger pipeline system, a much larger regional system that they're putting in place. Without getting into the legal basis for the dispute, given that this is still active litigation, city staff identified concerns about whether they would be able to do this under the grant. Going to court is risky. So again, without getting into those legal issues, we wanted to find out if we could condition the company's use of the land to replace those pipelines in a way that could satisfy the city, in a way that would protect the community's open space, the open space values, and also the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. So we approached Kerr-McGee with 26 settlement terms, and they agreed to them all. I don't want to go through each of them here. I'm just going to hit some highlights. If you have any questions about any other ones, such as ones that are in the settlement agreement itself or in the council communication, happy to answer questions. But just to hit the highlights. First, the company will have no lasting surface presence on that portion of the property. There will be no equipment left on the ground. Once they are done putting those pipelines in place under the ground, that should be the end of their presence on the property. Obviously, the biggest concern when you're putting pipelines in the ground is the possibility, however small, of a leak on the property. The company has agreed to a leak. Upon learning of a leak, they would begin cleanup operations no longer than 24 hours after learning of the leak. The cleanup would have to be substantially to pre-contamination conditions, and they would have to do it with diligence and without unreasonable interruption. That's right in the settlement agreement. These are obligations of the company that would not exist under the 1984 grant as written. These would be new obligations they would be taking on. The company will have to provide operations and maintenance guidelines to the city, and upon our request, any inspection reports that they make under the operation of those guidelines. They will only be transporting oil, gas, and water. They will not be transporting fracking wastewater through these pipelines. And I should say there are representatives of Kerr-McGee here tonight who would be happy to confirm that for you if you have any questions. And finally, they've agreed to our reclamation standards, including reseeding and restoring to the property upon installation of the pipelines substantially to its pre-construction conditions. Next, as it exists now, the grant controls what the company can do on the property. The settlement agreement would change that. The settlement agreement would require an infrastructure permit that is limited by the charter to 20 years. So every 20 years, the company will need to come back to the city for a new infrastructure permit, without which they cannot operate their pipelines under the grant. Part of that is paying fair market value for the first 20 years use of the land, which they wouldn't have had to do under the grant itself, and then fair market value payments for each of the next 20 years installments going into the future. So that first installment is upwards of $142,000. That includes all the easements necessary for them to come onto the property, as well as replacement of some cottonwood trees through the Public Works and Natural Resources operations in order to replace those trees. The city would be expected to renew the infrastructure permit every time it's due for renewal, unless Kerr-McGee materially breaches the settlement agreement, including, for example, by failing to clean up a leak properly, as I discussed earlier. But otherwise, the city would be expected to renew that infrastructure permit. The city can also revoke the infrastructure permit at any time for a material breach. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, the lawsuit would go away. So all of the risks associated with that would also go away. And since it would be dismissed with prejudice, the city and Kerr-McGee would not be able to bring the lawsuit back again. With that, the staff's recommending that the settlement would protect the city and its open space more certainly than going to court and fighting out the meaning of the 1984 grant. So we recommend that the council authorize the city attorney to execute the settlement agreement substantially as presented to you tonight. If you have any questions, I'm available as the representative.
Clarification, the original grant had a grant for 3 pipelines, is that correct?
Mayor, correct.
Okay, so we're just still replacing 3 with 3.
Correct, Mayor, and it's a replacement of the 3. It's not 3 additional new ones.
Right, you're right, yes. Have anybody done any studies as to how many truck trips? I mean, if we didn't have these pipelines and you were moving that oil and water with truck trips, wouldn't that be a substantial number of truck trips over a 20-year period?
Mayor, I believe that's correct. If you're looking for more detail, I suggest Dale Rademacher would have a better answer than I would.
Nice, Dan.
Mayor and City Council, Dale Rademacher, General Manager, Public Works, Natural Resources. So the question is, how many trucks over 20 years? Depends on how much is produced. What I would say is, and certainly these pipelines, a 12-inch pipeline will carry a lot of oil, but it would be hundreds and thousands of trucks easily to convey that amount of oil.
Okay.
In addition to probably the water. If they had to haul all the water in, you'd have water also being trucked in.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Levison.
Dale, you might as well just stay there. We've had concern, a voice from public comment this evening about whether or not, and Dan has stated that part of the settlement agreement is that there's only going to be water that is not fracking wastewater. So will there be testing of what goes through the pipeline periodically, or will we be able to, get any kind of testing at all to know what the quality and what's in the water, if there's anything different than what we've expected in the settlement agreement?
So Mayor Combs and Councilmember Levison, a couple of things. The water, you can take the water sort of one way, and it's our understanding that this water is it's Kerr-McGee owned water, so it's not city water. It is the water that they have water rights to out in Weld County, that they have sort of a centralized well field out there that they're actually conveying water on a couple of different pipeline routes coming out of sort of central Weld County, east and west. This is one of the routes. There's other pipelines to the north of us as well. And so that's conveying water from that well field, which is essentially water of a quality that meets their quality for hydraulic fracking. Certainly now for all those areas outside of the city that this pipeline conveys to. This is really a regional transmission line. So this pipeline doesn't start or end on city property. It actually extends well to the north of the city, and then it extends east beyond Highway 85, so well into the Weld County area. So
Do we know can you figure out where the pipeline goes, where the source,
Yes.
the wellhead source is for this water?
Yes, we've seen that information that they've showed us on where their well field is, and the my guess is we can ask for the some sort of sampling of the water in that pipeline. I doubt that would be an issue for them, given that there shouldn't be any reluctance to do that. But I don't think the agreement explicitly calls for them to do that. But I think we've got a decent working relationship that shouldn't be a big problem.
I mean, I just want to be sure that we don't spark some other kind of litigation by doubts being raised by the public saying that they suspect that there'll be fracked water run through this pipeline and there's no way to verify. So I guess I would like to see if we can't get, a spot verification once a year, twice a year, something like that, and be able to have that information on hand to head off any future suspicions or problems. Just because if there is something, then how would we ever know that if the charter was being violated?
And I think Councilmember Levinson on page 7, paragraph 4.9, does go to that Kerr-McGee will provide the city with information on the guidelines for the installation, operation, maintenance, and inspection of the pipeline system and its current health, safety, and environmental guidelines for the pipeline system. And so it's pretty broad language. We could probably include in that the information regarding the water.
Well, I think Eugene and Dan did a great job of negotiating and came up with a pretty good agreement. So I guess I'll let Councilmember Christensen weigh in.
Okay, thanks. I have a couple of questions, probably all of them for Dan. How far down is this pipeline?
I'm not Dan, but so the depth of the pipeline is in the range of 4 to 5 feet is the depth that it's been buried, and which is well below, like for our farmers to be tilling the soil and that kind of thing. They certainly want to get the water line below frost level. In this area, that's at least 4.5 to 5 feet to the top of the pipe.
Oh, it's copper. Okay. And maybe you could answer this too, because you know much more about farming. Actually, there was originally a provision, and I believe it's just what you didn't mention all 26, but there's a provision to compensate site farms in the event of them having problems with regaining their fertility or the productivity of their land. So that, could you, in one version it seemed like it was less than the other. It's for a year after, and then if it still doesn't perk up, then there's another extension.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Christensen, it would begin this year. It's for 2 years after installation.
Okay.
And Eugene just pulled up the exact language.
Okay.
For a longer period of disturbed crops are not fully restored during those 2 years.
Right. I just want to be sure that still got in there. And the other thing that was a concern of one of the citizens is that there would be no way for us, the city, to transfer the rights that we have for using this pipeline, should we ever want to, for the city's use. We couldn't transfer those rights to another oil company.
Mayor, Councilmember Christensen, it's for minerals that would be transported from city lands.
Okay.
So conceivably, it could be by an oil company lessee on city lands.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'm going to move that we approve or direct our city attorneys to accept this negotiation and settle the lawsuit. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0. Okay, now it's time for final call, public invited to be heard. Anybody from the public like to come down and speak at this time?
Jeff Messenger, 2199 Creekside Drive. Having read an article in the paper about what Councilman Bagley is proposing in terms of a 3-point plan, made me spend a little time thinking about annexations. I would like to see the city establish a policy, however it would be, that any future annexations, whether it be the kind that Mr. Bagley is talking about, or some totally separate from that, have in the annexation agreement a clause, whether or not the lawsuit for the ban is one, that no fracking can be, as a condition of annexation, no fracking can occur. This would be a contractual relationship between the applicant and the city, and would fall under a different set of legalities, because the applicant would have agreed to that up front. So it wouldn't make any difference what kind of outcome there was with the lawsuit to ban fracking. It's the least that you could do, given what the citizens, the 60% of the citizens who voted for this, have indicated that what they want public policy to be. And presumably would take it out of the court's hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak at second call, public invited to be heard?
Now for the rest of the story on that Kerr-McGee so-called settlement agreement. What the settlement agreement does is it grants Kerr-McGee a new right-of-way for a pipeline on open space property. They call it an infrastructure permit as part of a settlement agreement. But what the infrastructure permit and settlement agreement do is they grant Kerr-McGee the right, a new right of way for a pipeline on open space land. There's a couple things that I would like to have discussed after I speak here by Eugene May or his assistant. First of all, would you please have him discuss with you Longmont Municipal Code 4.04040, paragraphs G, H, I, and J. Paragraph J stating open space may only be used for purposes set forth above, and a pipeline is not one of the purposes for which open space can be used. So the settlement agreement, which grants a right-of-way on open space for a pipeline, is illegal. And I would like Mr. May to tell us why, in his communication to the City Council on this, he never made any mention of this code provision. He will probably say that it doesn't grant a new permit, but that's a factual issue that he didn't tell you about. He glossed over it. The factual issue is very simple. It's a new permit if at any time Kerr-McGee did not use the existing pipeline for a period of 12 consecutive months. And I read through the complaint and the answer and everything that was available to the public in the packet. That question would very easily be solved by simply looking at the records of Kerr-McGee. It's a pipeline company. They would have records as to whether they were using the pipeline to transport oil, gas, or water. And neither Kerr-McGee never offered those records, and strangely, Eugene May never asked for those records. They left that open because this litigation is manufactured litigation to cover up the fact that they're making a new grant of a right-of-way on open space. Now, I'm running out of time, but there's something else he didn't tell you, that there's an inconsistency in the agreement itself. If he would go over paragraph 4.2 of the agreement, he talks about a city charter 20-year limitation on infrastructure permits. And yet, if you read on, it binds the company to extend that infrastructure permit by another 20 years. So the agreement really does violate the city charter. I wrote down those citations here. I'm going to give them to Mr. May, and I would like some explanations.
Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak at final call? Public invited to be heard? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. So now it's time for mayor and council comments. Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to present a couple of motions, and the three that I'm going to propose, I'm going to read them specifically. I'm going to make the first one, but I'm going to read all three first. The one I have been inundated this week with phone calls and emails and conversations, and none of my proposals except for the first one is taking action tonight. I am advocating that we do something rather than just sit back and let the eastern border of Longmont basically be determined by other municipalities. So the three motions I'm going to make. The first one, I will move that we direct city staff to take action to acquire the parcel of land along Highway 66 between Weld County Road 3.5 and Weld County Road 5, utilizing open space dollars, and to develop the buffer on the eastern border of Longmont using open space funds or other tools such as conservation easements, IGAs, etc. Okay? The second motion I'm going to make is I'm going to move that we direct city staff to prepare a policy discussion regarding how we might prohibit the leasing of water to municipalities and other regional governments that would develop land near Longmont's current or anticipated borders, specifically the area between Longmont's eastern border and the I-25 corridor. So again, that second motion is to talk about how big the radius should be, all that stuff. There were some earlier comments about, by Ms. Peck saying that, we should consider a public participation or discussion. The whole reason why I'm making the motion this week rather than last week, I have not talked to anybody on council about these motions. So, and then three, the last one, which is also seems to be the most controversial, but I'm not advocating that we just do a land grab, that we go out and start annexing. Annexation is a voluntary process. It is also something that requires knowledge, insight, forethought, and right now my concern is nobody on council has the institutional knowledge necessary to know what in the world the eastern border of Longmont looks like or what we can do. So the motion that I'm going to make is I'm going to move that we direct city staff to engage collaboratively whenever possible Meade, Frederick, Firestone, and other municipalities regarding the possibility of Longmont annexing or otherwise controlling development of the general area between Longmont's eastern border and the I-25 corridor, and to prepare a report for council and the public which explains the current and immediately foreseeable status of this area and the possible actions Longmont could undertake in order to forward and protect Longmont's interests. Notice, it is not an invitation to annex. It is not an invitation to go out and start, going hog wild on unplanned development. I have a great deal of respect for Gordon Pedro, who has served this city for nearly 3 decades. And my point is we need to gather the information and insert ourselves into the discussion and have good planning processes in place that we have a voice and a seat at the table. That is the point of all 3 of these motions. Nothing more, nothing less. So, that said.
So are you going to make those motions one at a time? Or
I'm going to make them one at a time.
Okay.
Sarah, do you want to say something first?
Councilmember Levison.
I don't think we even have enough information on any of this for you to make the motions, frankly. We've directed staff to go off and do a bunch of work, and there's 3 substantial pieces of land, planning, and infrastructure dynamic here that it's going to take more time. And maybe I saw a comment in an article in the newspaper. The mayor suggested this would be kind of a retreat topic. We chose maybe to not do a retreat topic. I think discussing this in depth at the retreat would be a good idea. But a lot of this involves what we're going to have as general discussions for the comp plan. So maybe we should direct staff to include some things in the comp plan. We're going to have our first Envision Longmont comp plan meeting on Thursday evening at 7. We can discuss that in the scope of that work. And I just think that in some ways, I don't want to start a new and different kind of border war. I think we've had great relationships with Meade. We've had a settlement with Firestone over the border issue, and I think we need to look through the IGA process with Meade, and then maybe not start poking sticks in folks' eyes. I do appreciate, though, the rather aggressive language that you've used, and making it very clear that we're not going to take action as a council, and we want to advise councils in the future that we're not going to sell our assets, such as water, that would spur growth and development in neighboring communities that, in fact, probably would do our community harm to do such a thing. I think that's a very good long view, but I'm not sure about supporting any of the 3 motions because I just haven't had enough time to think about it.
Councilor Christensen.
Well, I actually think this would give us the time to think about it, and so I actually think the first and second one, I think the first one about adding open space would be sort of an easy thing to tackle. The second one of leasing water, I would suggest that maybe we could incorporate some things like not selling to entities within 25 miles or not selling to any entity that contradicts the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan or the city charter. The third one, I think, brings up the most problems, and that's when I think we really need to spend, that's going to be a long conversation, I think. I think that requires a lot of study to figure out whether we can actually do that and how. But I would support directing staff to consider these, consider moving forward with exploring these possibilities. Thank you.
Councilmember Bailey.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Coons. So I'm just going to go through them. And again, sorry, somebody else. I didn't notice the light on. Sorry, Councilman.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess this is a question for Councilmember Bagley. So all this stuff's supposed to come back to us? Is that just? Yes. Okay. See, and we have boards and commissions that are set up to address these before they get to us. So like the first one would be definitely Parks and Rec Advisory Board. The second one would be the Water Board. And the third one would definitely be Planning and Zoning. I don't mind getting information, but to circumvent what we have established with these boards and commissions, there's always for everything that we've done, we have a process of allowing those boards and commissions say. To circumvent that now, I'm not that in favor of. I don't mind getting information on all three, because if you don't have information on all the topics, because these all correspond with each other, then you're not getting all the information.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I think I'm glad that Councilmember Bagley has brought these three issues up. They're three issues I think we need to deal with. And all he is doing is asking staff to bring us information on these things so that we can refer them to the proper boards and commissions and go forward with a plan. I think we need to have a plan, and I think this is the beginning of it, and I thank Councilmember Bagley for starting that process.
Well, just what I read in the paper and what you said tonight were two totally different things. So I am more supportive. I mean, it's not like the third one, we're not taking any direct action. All we're doing is just getting information. And I think it's always a good thing to get information, to have these conversations with our neighbors. It doesn't mean we're in a land grab or that we're going to actually act on anything. But I think the way I understood his motion, it kind of made sense. I mean, I'll have to listen to it carefully again when he remakes it the next time to see if something else doesn't resonate. But I do agree with Councilmember Bagley. Once we get the information, we can take this information. We don't have to act on it then. We can then refer it to the boards and say, what do you think, Parks and Rec? What do you think, Water? So I don't think there's anything that's, at this point, acting on these is going to cut out our boards and commissions from doing their job when we want their advice and input. Councilmember Levison.
I want to give Councilmember Moore an opportunity to jump if he wants to jump in. No. Okay. So I just, I really think that having the information come first to us, I think it really, agreeing with Councilmember Santos that we should really let the boards and commissions have a crack at it. And also let our staff do some talking, backdoor channels with property owners. And I know there's going to be maybe a lot of phones ringing tomorrow, depending on how we vote on this. However, I really like to take a measured approach. Many years ago, I was asked a question when I applied for a council appointment that was an interim appointment about, what do I think about our eastern border? And I don't remember the exact reply, but I thought that we should always be concentrating on what our current established boundaries were, as far as looking at some aspiration that none of the people before us on council thought that there would be such a boom in Colorado. We'd want to go all the way out to I-25 with our city. And no one ever saw that happening, 30 years ago, 20 years ago even. So I think we've got plenty of on our plates right now for redevelopment and to grow our city internally. So it's difficult for me to understand reaching further from our borders, especially since we do have a buffer of open space.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Combs. Well, yes, I like some of these. No, I don't like some of the other parts of some of this, but that's okay. I think what we need to understand, though, is that at the end of the day, council still sets policy. If council wants to go ahead and move forward with this without boards and commissions, that's council's prerogative. And but the information will be useful, and I would support at least two of these.
Councilmember Bagley.
We can argue at them as we go through. So I move that we direct city staff to take action to acquire the parcel of land along Highway 66 between Weldon County Road 3.5 and Weldon County Road 5, utilizing open space dollars, and develop the buffer on the eastern border of Longmont using open space funds or other tools such as conservation easements, IGAs, etc.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Wow. Wow.
I was just kidding. That's all I wanted. No, all right. Next. Okay. It's to. I move that we direct city staff to prepare a policy discussion regarding how we might prohibit the leasing of water to municipalities and other regional governments that would develop land near Longmont's current or anticipated borders, specifically the area between Longmont's eastern border and the I-25 corridor.
Second. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Levison.
So do you want to also fine tune that we wouldn't sell water to an entity that would recharge a well, that they might have taken the water out of the well and sold it to one of those entities, and we're providing them with water to replenish?
Councilmember Bagley.
I'm being really careful not to set policy tonight. Meaning that all I want is city staff to bring back with the expertise. And Dale's like, you suck. This is going to take work. Sorry, Dale. He's smiling. This is not a policy decision tonight. It is a call to basically say we have to start thinking about this. So let's have the discussion. And as painful as it would be, let's get the details and have that discussion. Whether it be 5 miles, 25 miles, 0 miles, stupid idea, Bagley, whatever. Okay. So, no, I wouldn't modify it tonight because it's just a call for us to take action rather than setting policy.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Wow, that's... Boy, you've got a 666.
Yeah, that's a D. All right, so before I make this next one, okay, after I met with our good friend today, Mr. Pedro, I sat down and I made a coloring chart, and I want to hold it up, and I'll hold it up for each of you, and then towards the television camera. So what you're going to see here is the blue is Longmont, orange is Firestone, and green is Frederick. These are and then light orange is Meade. These are the lands that have already been annexed. All the yellow is either Meade, Frederick, or Firestone's plan to annex. Okay, so I'm going to hold it up. And currently, we're not in the game. All that yellow. Now, I am not, what I'm about ready to read does not call for us to annex all this yellow or to go out and annex anything. What it is to bring back a report so that we all as a council understand what the plan is, what they're doing, what opportunities there are for open space, for conservation easements, and figure out whether it's open space, retail, nothing, but it's doing something. It's basically pushing us forward so that we can have a discussion on what we're going to do with Longmont's eastern borders. Even if you don't want any development, we still need to have a discussion. Because right now, Frederick, Firestone, and Meade are having the discussion without us voicing our opinion. That's it. Okay? So again, just to make sure that I'm not being too tricky here, okay, here's the motion. I shall read it slowly. Okay? I move that we direct staff to engage collaboratively whenever possible Meade, Frederick, Firestone, and other municipalities regarding the possibility of Longmont annexing or otherwise controlling development of the general area between Longmont's eastern border and I-25 corridor, and to prepare a report for council and the public which explains the current and immediately foreseeable status of this area and the possible actions Longmont could undertake in order to forward and protect Longmont's interests. That's it.
Second.
Councilmember Christensen.
I would like to add that it would be helpful for staff to also consider in this report the cost of providing services to people, that part, and also legal to provide us with some indication of what the repercussions would be for fracking, for our charter, because a lot of that land is, as we know, frackable imminently. Thanks, anyway.
So are you accepting Polly's?
Yeah, yes, because I think it's already included, meaning that if we annex something, they'd be in the city of Longmont, they wouldn't be able to frack. So it'd be, and my point is, again, no policy is being made tonight. This is just basically saying, we want the information, we want to have a discussion to figure out what we're going to do with Longmont's eastern border. Because right now, if I didn't have my coloring chart, you would see that it's basically a quilt of orange, purple, green, except we're not involved. And it just overlaps.
Yeah. Well, it kind of makes sense to be involved than to not be involved. At least then we got a chance to make decisions in the future. Councilmember Larson?
Except the reason we're not involved right now is we're holding all the border wars that are going on, that are in litigation in Weld County Court many times. And it's a court that we have not had good luck in either. So I am hesitant. I don't think I can support this motion. I think that it'd be nice to have a discussion. We're talking about the comp plan, but I think that we're going to end up focusing just on our eastern border as opposed to, all those other cities have to work out. They're fighting each other, and for us to get involved with those issues right now, I feel very uncomfortable that how this is going to be construed.
Okay. Well, I guess we've got a motion. It's been seconded. It's time to vote again. Okay. Votes 5-2 with Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Levison dissenting. Okay. Any further council or discussions or comments? Councilmember Finley.
I want to make like 10 motions. No, just kidding.
I second.
I just want to have my business of the week, which would be the Boulder County Farmers Market, which opens this Saturday morning. Excited about that. That means spring's here and fresh veggies are on the way. Go check out the Boulder County Farmers Market at the fairgrounds.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to wish everybody, this happens to be one of those weekends of lots of different religious celebrations. So I just want to wish everybody a wonderful celebration, whether or not you celebrate Passover or Easter. It's a week that we all will have some contemplative time with our fellow practitioners of religion many times, and just hope everybody has a great celebration, whatever you celebrate this weekend. And also want to wish everybody a happy spring break, and I know there'll be a lot of people out and about. I just want to make sure everybody has safe travels if you're out of town, and safe travels if you're just getting around and enjoying the sunshine. So be safe out there, folks.
Councilmember Christensen.
Okay, well, I'm going to be the Debbie Downer nagging mother or something, but I would like to urge everybody to donate blood, particularly if you have a negative factor. For instance, B negative or O negative, that's like 1% of the population. So please consider giving blood, because it's really hard to get, and you may need it someday. And to be even more of a downer, please, if you're over 50, just bite the bullet and get a colonoscopy, because you will. It could save your life. So please do that.
Okay, any other council comments? Seeing none, city manager, any comments?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.